Gareth, our guest today, musician, writer, mentor, researcher, comedian and mental health consultant, and not-so-old rocker. Gareth can now add author to that impressive list. This week, his book, The Procrastinator's Guide to Killing Yourself, yes, that's the title, and somewhat controversial, I think, is released, and we're talking to Gareth about this book on mental health. So, Gareth, I hope you're there from the back blocks of Golden Bay.
Hello, Sheldon.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you.
You're looking pretty good.
Yeah, I've got the face for radio, I think.
Oh, definitely got the face for radio. Now, what about this contentious title, The Procrastinator's Guide to Killing Yourself?
Yeah, sure. I guess I've kind of forgotten that it's a bit controversial. The title comes from a blog that I wrote, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I wrote a blog, and so obviously the controversial bit is using the words killing yourself. And so part of the reason that I've done that is that I really want to avoid and get beyond using the word suicide, because suicide's got a really dodgy origin, and I think we've adopted it as a kind of euphemistic way of saying something that we don't want to say, and we do that a lot in mental health.
we do that a lot in New Zealand.
Yes. So part of it is like, let's have an honest conversation. Let's not use these kind of these words and this terminology to hide things that are painful and really upsetting. Let's not avoid that. Let's take that on and see what the other side of it looks like.
Well, certainly killing yourself has got a bareness about it, hasn't it? It's straight to the point.
Yeah, and I think if you kind of do a little research on the word suicide, it doesn't even exist as a real word. It was coined in the 19th century really to make the act of killing yourself illegal. And in doing so, it kind of passed a bit of a sort of moral judgment on those feelings. And I think for me, so the whole point of the Procrastinator's Guide is that, not invalidating those feelings that you wanted to kill yourself. Like, they're really important and can be really useful feelings. And if we invalidate it, and I think the word suicide does invalidate it, then we never really get to grips with it.
This is quite a different take. You're doing this deliberately to be a little bit controversial?
No, controversial. I mean, inviting conversations just like this. So, I've been part of the Mad Pride movement now for around about 12 years. And I think a key part of that, just like any other pride movement, is, challenging language, reclaiming our own experience. I don't think the words killing ourselves is the nicest way to say it, but I feel like it's an honest way, and I'd love to find other ways to explore that.
Have you had, I'm not sure at what stage you're at in terms of promoting the book, releasing it. I believe you're releasing it this week. Is that right?
Yeah, so Friday it comes out on a variety of formats: Kindle, Amazon, iBooks, and then there's an audio book. I don't know if that will make it by Friday, but it's very soon, in the next week or so.
And is there going to be a hard copy book that you're going to sell in bookshops?
Yeah, I'm open to that. At the moment, you can order a paperback copy online from Amazon, and then perhaps in New Zealand, maybe look at doing a print run. There's lots of people, I guess because there's quite a few of us old rockers around, there's lots of people who want the hard copy in their hands. So I may do a print run as well.
You reckon us old rockers haven't moved on to iBox, Tinder and e-reading?
I was just going to say amen to that one. Yeah, I prefer something that you can actually tangibly have rather than fluffing around on media.
Yeah, me too. And I wrote this book. It's a really small book. It doesn't take long to read at all. But I wrote it so you could kind of sit down and read it in one sitting. and then maybe take some time to digest it. My actual preference these days is actually audiobooks. So I've recorded my own audio version of this. So yeah, it takes about an hour or so to listen to. But then again, you can kind of, I've got lots of audiobooks I keep going back to and just, checking in with.
So you can take a walk around Golden Bay and listen to your own vocal on the book that you've written.
Yeah, well, except I've moved now. I'm actually over in Stoke, in Nelson now.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
You're moving around.
I've decided this is part of my research for a comedy show that I'm building called An Englishman's Guide to New Zealand. So I'm just trying to find all the nice places to live.
Well, if you watch Coast New Zealand, you've got an Englishman's guide to the coast of New Zealand, haven't you? Who's that guy that does Coast New Zealand?
Yeah, I've seen that a while ago. Yeah, he's not as funny as me, though. That's the point.
Oh, well, nobody would be as funny as you, Gareth. There's no doubt about that. Well, I mean, you've got a publisher. Has the publisher made any comment about this title?
Yeah, the publisher's me, so I kind of got that one across the line pretty quick. So as with most of these things, Sheldon, it's a one-man show. I kind of wrote the words, put together the book cover, and worked out how to get it online. I have had some help from some professional writers in terms of getting it up to sort of readable levels, and an expat actually over in Australia who's doing some great work. Again, in the fringes of mental health, which is where I really see myself these days. He's going to be putting out a blog of it on Monday.
Right. So where could any of our listeners access it? You've mentioned Amazon, Tinder, iBox. Do we need an address in order to access that?
Yeah, so all the links are on my personal website, which is gareth-edwards.com.
Right.
So all the links are there for the various platforms. And, yeah, I'll be posting regularly on Facebook as new platforms become available. And yeah, I'm hoping to, well, let's say I'm open to invitations to try and, like yourself, Sheldon, people who hear about it and want to talk about it. I'm not really wanting to, self-promote too much. It's like if people want to have a conversation, then great. But what I found with the blog, and this is what inspired me to write the book, or to write this one first. I've got a couple of others that are coming as well. But what the blog was really useful for was people would send the blog to people they were concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really made me think, actually, I do have a slightly different perspective on this. And, I've worked in suicide prevention now for 10 years. In fact, more than that, 12 years now, gosh. And, there's some great work being done in there, but it all comes from a place of suicide is a bad thing and you need to get yourself well. And that wasn't my experience. That's not how I got myself through those times. So I just wanted to kind of, create a little something that gives a different view.
So how did you get through those times without going the whole way?
Procrastinating.
Right.
So it's a very literal title. So what I found was in those moments where the desire to kill myself was really strong, rather than, because what I tended to do was spend a lot of time thinking, why am I like this? Why have I got this desire? What's this all about? Am I broken? Am I ill? Etc., etc. And what I found is that actually by saying I do want to kill myself, but I'll do it later, I won't do it now, like I will do it, but I'll do it later, took the pressure off that moment. And as soon as that pressure was gone, even if it was for literally a few minutes, then there was some space in those few minutes. And really a big part of the book is about how to grow that space, so you have more opportunity to exist rather than worry about not existing.
So is this something of a description of your own personal experience?
Yeah, very much so, yeah. So I kind of boiled it down to the 5 things that I did particularly in my 20s. So, I mean, I often talk about wanting to kill myself as something that's in the past because it's less intense than it was in my teens and 20s. But it's still there. I still have those ideas, those thoughts and feelings, and sometimes, very rarely now, those urges to act on them. But it's it's less intense now. And also, and again, I kind of get to this in the book, when they come up, I now see them as a really useful opportunity to revisit some key aspects of what my life is about. So it's still scary, it's still intense, it's still dark, but I know that it can also be really useful as well.
So I imagine that when you get to that scary, dark place, you've got strategies that you can put in place to take the edge off that really dark experience?
Yeah. So like I said, the key one is that procrastination. And this is a technique I actually found out after my own experiences. I went and worked in addictions for a few years. And it's actually a really common technique in addictions. So if you're struggling with alcohol or drugs or even smoking or any kind of addiction, sex or shopping, so when you get that irresistible urge to do something, rather than fight it and say, I'm a bad person or I'm not really recovering or whatever, you say, yeah, I will have a cigarette. I'll just have it later. And what happens is when you get to later, for a lot of people, that urge is less intense and more manageable. So rather than denying the feeling of it, you say, yeah, I really want a cigarette right now. I'll just have it later. I'll have it in an hour. Or I'll have it, later on today. And that just takes the pressure off. Not every time and not for everybody, but it's certainly a well-proven technique in addictions. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. It's Declan here coming in case I hadn't introduced myself, Gareth. I know that Sheldon said I was a technician as well. I was just going to say, I've lost my thought now. Go back to you.
Go back to me. Well, yeah. So procrastinating is one of the strategies to discourage killing ourselves.
Yes.
Are there four others, Gareth?
Yeah, so after that, the main one, and this is one that I come back to many, many times in my life. So the second step was about standing still. And this is a phrase that my older sister taught me. And it's really about creating a little pause in your life. Because one of the things that was really tough for me, back in my 20s, particularly my mid-20s, is I felt like I had lots of problems, relationships, work, health, housing, career, lots of things.
Being in hospital?
And this was before the hospital time, so this was kind of just before that period. And so rather than, I was feeling overwhelmed that I couldn't fix these problems. So rather than fix them, my older sister taught me this great technique of how to simplify your day-to-day life so that you can get a little bit of solid ground on which to take on your problems. And so that's the second step. It's called standing still.
It's called?
Standing still.
Standing still, right.
Yeah.
Or as you say, you use the word pause, which I think is one that is very commonly used in mindfulness, to just take a pause.
It's interesting you could say that, because when I've had strong feelings of that, I've just said to myself, you need to sit in this chair and just not move and not go anywhere, because I knew if I got out of it, what could happen.
Yeah. Very powerful. Doing nothing is one of the most powerful things we can do.
And do you do anything to sort of amplify the benefit of taking a pause? Do you breathe, or are you mindful, try and stay in the moment?
Yeah, so the standing still is really a little longer. So in that procrastinating, so the first step is surviving. And I think that's where a lot of those tools can be useful, like mindfulness, breathing, belly breath, abdominal breathing, etc. The standing still is really creating a sort of day-to-day existence that you can live with. Because for me, certainly back in my mid-20s, every day was just a fight for survival. I was just literally trying to find one reason to stay alive. And so what I needed after I'd kind of got to that point where I could, delay the app, was just a different way of being. And, that might last a few weeks or months, but it's just a real simplification. So a lot of it's, simplifying what you do at work, simplifying relationships, just trying to find a way to create a little time where you're not trying to fix yourself, you're just being.
You're with Take It From Us on 104.6 Planet FM.
We're just on the tipping point of an absolute, revitalisation of mental health in this country.
Well, I very much hope so. I think the panel that has been appointed and the work that they're currently doing around the country and the profile that they're giving mental health, it looks promising, doesn't it? Yeah, no, I'm always optimistic, but I'm very optimistic about, this panel, but also the response to whatever they recommend. That will be when we'll see, the real traction. Have you personally made submissions or had the opportunity to talk to the panel? No, well, I'm actually working on, so as I mentioned before, this Procrastinator's Guide is one of probably 3, maybe 4 books that I'm putting together. And one of those is called The Manifesto. The Manifesto? The Manifesto. Oh, the Manifesto, right. Yes. So this is kind of summarising my sort of 20 years working in mental health in terms of, I think one of the limitations of the inquiry is they're asking, what services need to be better. And I think that's fine. We've definitely seen services impoverished over the last, 10 years. But I think we need more than that. I think we need, for me, this is not so much a health issue as it is a social inequality issue. And we need to address that, really. So that's what the manifesto is. It's a vision for a more accepting, inclusive and supportive world. So when you say social inequality, do you mean that those of us who might be on one side of the tracks get better mental health service than those on the other side? Well, it's not so much mental health service. It's, so I guess the way to put it, certainly rich people, have these same experiences like everybody else. The difference is they have resources, and that word has got lots underneath it. They have resources to address it. And it's very rare that they will lose a footing in society. So, if you've got access to resources, that might be mental health services, it might be, strong employment, it might be wealth that you can rely on and take time out, it might be friends, social connections, people looking after you. If you've got that in your life, then your experience of mental health will be very different than if you haven't. And I think that's one of the main issues. I'm not worried whether you're ill or well. That's a personal journey. But you should definitely have a full place in society either way. Well, TV3 is doing a little series on the news about the tale of 2 cities in Auckland, and they're saying that the equality divide is greater. In other words, I guess inequality is the greatest that it has been in Auckland, and I would suggest in New Zealand. But, what we're going to do about that, I'm not sure. It seems to me that, the horse has bolted and the momentum to create inequality has got a pace about it. Yeah, it's certainly, like when I arrived here in 2002, Britain's got much wider gap between the haves and the have-nots. And it's much wider, and there's a lot more people in the have-nots, particularly after the last, again, sort of decade of austerity measures. Whereas when I arrived here in New Zealand, there certainly was poverty and inequality. But, for example, when I arrived, I was working in homeless services, and New Zealand was the only country in the world that was talking about ending homelessness, because it was predominantly an Auckland issue, and a central Auckland issue at that, and it was incredibly small numbers. They were talking specifically about street homelessness. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, that has absolutely, grown exponentially over the last sort of 18, 20 years. I don't know about the horse bolting. Maybe I'm just a delusional optimist, but Kiwis seem to have this real bloody-minded view of a fair go. Yeah. That is essentially socialism by another name. And I think Kiwis just,
they're intolerant of unfairness. And I think that might be the saving grace.
They're intolerant of unfairness.
Yeah, Kiwis hate it. You know, there's no... You don't have that kind of self-congratulatory kind of view of... You know, you've got no class system as such. So it's not like the aristocracy can wander around New Zealand going, oh, you know, well, we're all fine, so that's great. Even wealthy Kiwis really don't like unfairness.
Yeah, well, I was just saying at my philosophy class that I live a somewhat schizophrenic lifestyle, and I do have the opportunity occasionally to mix with the sort of well-heeled, and unfortunately I sense that they are very unaware of what it's like on the other side of the tracks. They certainly are very unaware about all the key issues of mental health, the isolation, the fact that there are people in mental health who may only see their key worker as the only person they see in an entire week. That sort of reality, which doesn't really touch them.
Yeah. I think one of the consequences, particularly the last 10 years, is that, you know, whoever's in charge gets to paint the picture. And I think, you know, with a national centre-right government, they want to paint a different picture. I think this government would be a little bit more realistic. They've already shown themselves to be that, you know, that they're very happy to put these issues out there and have a national debate. So I think that's, you know, it's going to take a while for that to register, but I think that's one of the crucial shifts.
Well, there's a very good example with this review of the mental health system and, the crisis that I think has been recognised in mental health. So that certainly is a huge advance. We'd better just get back to, we were talking about your book, which is launched this week, The Procrastinator's Guide to Killing Yourself. You were talking about sort of simplifying life in order to make it easier. Yeah, that's a real challenge, I think.
It is. It's a huge challenge. And I think, I write in the book, it sounds really nice, but at the time I found it really distressing and really difficult. I thought my life was over, and my sister's kind of shown me this way of, just stripping things back to, So standing still in the way I understand it from what she taught me is doing the least you can do without doing nothing. And that's a huge thing, particularly in a kind of productivity-driven society.
You're with Take It From Us on 104.6 Planet FM.
This new book, The Procrastinator's Guide to Killing Yourself, is an e-book. Why couldn't you introduce some of your tracks into it to make it even more appealing?
Yeah, I did look at that. I think possibly with Apple I could do like an immersive experience. Maybe, so along with the manifesto, that's probably the one. I'm hoping to get that out in time for the inquiry, which closes in a couple of weeks. But then there's another one that I'm writing called Beyond Normal. And I think for that one I might have an album that kind of accompanies the words.
Well, this is Take It From Us, and thank you very much for listening. We'll sign out, Declan and I, and look forward to having you back next Tuesday at 12:30 on Planet FM.